folks a couple moments to hop on, and we'll go ahead and get started. If you're here and you haven't registered, if you happened to just click on the link, in order to get the materials, the hard copy of the things we're going to talk about sent to you via email, you do have to register. So if you haven't registered, you can still do that even, once after we finish this evening. But if you wanted the hard copy materials or email electronically sent to you, then go ahead and register. And I'm just going to wait maybe like 2 or 3 more minutes before we get started.
I knew amidst a long time, and now that he has completed his journey.
So just a couple housekeeping things while we're waiting another minute or so. I believe that you're coming in on mute, so you won't be able to flip that off, but you certainly can type into the chat box if you have a question. And actually, Ariel, one of our instructors, is here with me tonight. Do you want to pop on and say hello, Ariel? So you'll see her. She's one of our instructors. You'll see her popping in. She's going to help kind of just track questions and make sure that we get to everybody's questions either during this hour, or if we don't get to a question during this hour, we'll make sure, this is going to be recorded, so we'll make sure to send responses to those questions out to you after the webinar is over. Thank you. So you certainly can type in questions into the chat box while I'm talking, or give a little hand wave if you had something that you wanted to say or to share. And I'm just going to wait 1 more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. We do also have some resources that we won't be looking at tonight that we're going to share afterward as well. Just some more home practice tips and things that you can do with your family, just for your reference. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So before we get into some information, I am going to just lead us through a little bit of a practice for about 2 minutes. So just take a moment and kind of notice where you are. If you're at home, if you're at work, and just kind of look around your space. Physically notice where you are. Maybe look to your right and left behind you, and then take a moment in your seat, if you're sitting in a chair or if you're sitting on the floor, and just really kind of feel for your bottom or your feet and where they're connected to the ground or to your chair. And really feeling for all 4 corners of both feet, or feeling for the bottom of your seat on the right side, the left side of your body. And then bring your shoulders up towards your ears. Take a long breath in if that feels okay. And then drop your shoulders in a long breath out if that's okay with your body this evening. And then just 1 more like that. Long breath in, shrug the shoulders up. And then a long breath out, let your shoulders drop. Good. And then let your hands just rest on your abdomen. Let your eyes focus on one point in your room, or they might just naturally flutter close. And just feeling for the rise and fall of your belly as you're breathing. If you can't quite access that in your abdomen, you can always bring a hand up to your chest as well. And you might feel your breath there. And we're just going to follow that breath. So just following your in-breath and your out-breath. Just a few more moments. Just really tuning in. And then you can let your hands come on down to your lap or wherever they feel comfortable. And just take a moment to look around again. If your eyes were closed, flutter them open. And just check in and notice how you feel. So I'm going to just go over kind of our structure tonight. An hour goes really fast, but kind of the purpose of this evening is to really talk about how some ways to find balance and rest, right? Within kind of this world that we're living in, especially thinking about back to school. So we'll take some time at the beginning just to reflect, to gain a little bit of insight into our current experience, how we're feeling, how we're, existing in current life. And then we'll look at a little bit of the science behind how this disruption affects how we feel, how this disruption, the pandemic, affects how we're showing up in our day-to-day life and how it's showing up in our kiddos. And then we'll take the last 30 to 20 minutes to really embody some practices that can help to restore some balance and rest in our system. And then we could also share those practices with our children, with our partners, with our parents, with anyone in our life. So we will go through them tonight as a self-preservation, self-care practice, but everything that we do, you can easily also do with your kids or the people in your household. So I wanted to just take a minute to kind of check in. I know we all can't see each other and interact that way, but if you would type maybe into the chat just how you're feeling right now. Just a one word, noticing anything in your body, anything emotionally, just kind of how you're feeling this evening. I'm just kind of checking in with yourself around that. And so if you have something to write with, scrap piece of paper, just going to take a few moments to reflect kind of again on our experience in the here and now. Good, feeling good, yeah. Feels definitely like a Wednesday to me. If you're watching this and it is Wednesday, it's Wednesday today. Definitely feels like a Wednesday. So for now, he said, if you have a scrap piece of paper, you can write these answers down, or you can kind of just reflect. But sometimes before we really can engage in the practices, we have to start with awareness, right? If we don't recognize that our body's feeling distressed, then we would have no reason to engage in any of the practices that help us reset. So self-awareness really is kind of that first step. And then that's also something that we can embody and teach our children and our families at home as well, right? So just taking a few moments to check in with some of these ideas. And these we'll send to you if you're registered afterwards, so you don't have to worry about writing down the prompts or anything like that. But I'm just going to share my screen here so you can see them. Okay. And so this first one is just, when I envision or hear the phrase back to school, my initial response is, my gut response when I hear or think about that phrase, back to school. Just take a moment and notice, what is your initial response? How does that feel? What comes up for you? And then notice, where does that come up for you in your body? Where does that come up for you in your body? Is it a gut reaction? Does your face get hot? Does your chest tighten? I envision or hear the phrase back to school, my initial response, and where I feel that in my body. And you can certainly keep writing if something's really coming to you and you need to get it down. You can always come back to this later. But this next kind of insight or thought, one of my biggest concerns or sources of anxiety at this time. What's one of my biggest concerns or sources of anxiety at this time? And where do I hold or carry anxiety in my body? Where can you notice that anxiety showing up physically in your body? And then I would ask if anyone noticed anything and they wanted to share. Again, you're welcome to type that into the chat. And Ariel, if you can kind of hop in if there's anything anyone wanted to share around either of those two things, sources of anxiety, and certainly you don't have to share the sources of anxiety or just what it feels like to hear that phrase back to school in COVID-19 era, in virtual homeschool era, what that's like for you. And so if we're just moving on then, there's two more prompts to kind of set some foundation, some groundwork for the self-awareness piece. And one of those is just sitting with the word balance. So when you envision or you hear the word balance, what images, thoughts, sensations come up for you? You hear the word balance. What images, thoughts, or sensations come up for you? And if there was one action that you might take toward balance this fall, what would it be? Maybe it's coming to this webinar tonight. If there were one action that you might take toward balance this fall, what would it be? Just sit with that for a moment.
Megan, I don't know if you saw, but we did have someone bring something through from your last question. Is that right if I go ahead and share?
Sure, go ahead.
Someone shared that they started Monday and they only have 2.5 hours of online classes right now, but it's going well and they're supposed to go back October 12th. Let's see what will happen.
Okay, all right. It sounds like that's feeling okay for now. Good, thank you for sharing. And it looks like there's, oh, that's the same one, okay. And so then the last kind of prompt or insight is just to sit with the word rest. So what comes up? It's a very different word than balance, right? So sit with that word rest. What comes up for you? What does it feel like? What does it look like? What resistance might there be with the word rest? And if there was one action that you might take toward rest this fall, what would it be? Or even just today, what would it be? One action that you might take toward rest. And then again, I would invite if anyone wanted to type in anything around the word balance or around the word rest that came up for you, you're welcome to type that in and share, but certainly not required. Good, good, okay. All right, so again, just starting with some of that self-awareness can be really useful, not only for ourselves, but also then to model at home, right? When we're managing our kids and everything else that's going on at home with all of the virtual learning and people working from home and all of those things. So I wanted to give you just a little bit of information about how stress kind of offers or unsettles our system or affects our functioning. A lot of kind of what we see, what I experience myself, I'm a parent, I'm a wife, I have a job, so I'm experiencing all of these things along right with you. It's just kind of this relentless, why can't I focus? Why am I not sleeping well? Why am I so irritable? Like there's all these things that we're all experiencing in different ways at different times. And so I wanted to just give a little bit of information that kind of explains why that's happening. And this might be information that you're familiar with, that you're not familiar with. But again, sometimes it's nice just to kind of affirm, oh, there's a reason why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling, right? So we are wired, we are born, we are designed to respond to stress, right? We are born with this adaptive stress response system so that as human beings, we can survive. And over time, certainly that stress response system has adapted to our way of life as we're not living in, prehistoric times anymore, but we have this response system built into our bodies from birth that really is meant to help us adapt and survive. And so this is a really simplified overview of that stress response system in that we have a sympathetic nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system. And a really simple way to think about that is the gas pedal and the brake pedal. And so if you can see on the screen, the sympathetic nervous system is that gas pedal. It revs us up. It prepares us to take fight, to flight, or to freeze. And so some of the things that happen when that sympathetic system, that gas pedal gets revved up is our heart beats fast. Our breath is fast and shallow. Our pupils expand. Our gut becomes inactive, so digestion stops. The blood rushes to our skeletal muscles away from our brain, making it hard to think clearly. So there's a reason why we're having trouble concentrating. Hormones rush through our body, making us feel anxious. Cortisol, adrenaline. So our body's preparing for a fight, right? It expends all of our energy. So that's the gas pedal, right? And so when we are faced with difficult circumstances, with triggers, with trauma, with the unknown, it revs us up, right? So that we can prepare and we can react, so that we can survive. The parasympathetic nervous system is like that brake pedal, right? So it calms us down, it prepares us for rest, brings our cortex back online so that we can think and process and rationalize, and so that we can restore. So when that brake pedal gets turned on, our heartbeat is slow and rhythmic. Our breath is full and slow. Our pupils shrink. Our gut is active. So you might also hear this called the rest and digest part of our nervous system. So we have energy stored so that we can focus on things internally. This is unconscious, obviously, on things like digestion. Blood flows to the gut, the lungs, and the brain, again, so we can breathe full, expansive, slow breaths. We can think reasonably. Hormones rush in that lift our mood and relax us. Things like serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin, all of these neurotransmitters that make us feel good and pleasure and calm. And it conserves our energy, so we really can get deep rest. So if you just take a moment to look at those two things, that gas pedal that revs us up and the brake pedal that brings us down, there is a lot for me that's like an aha moment, like, oh, wow, it makes sense that I've been feeling the ways I've been feeling. It makes sense that my children have been feeling and reacting the way that they have been, because collectively, globally, we have been living under a lot of stress since March, right? And then the other thing to think about is stress isn't always bad, right? We actually need some form of stress to be productive, right? So there's positive stress, which is our body's response to just normal everyday stress. Starting a new daycare, taking a test at school, starting a new job, presenting a webinar online. Like, these are everyday stresses that our body, has resilience to respond to. And there's tolerable stress. So here's where our body's responding to a bit more serious stress, like a scary injury, immigration, living through a natural disaster, right? And so we still, we have that adaptive system so that when things like that happen, we have tools within our body that help us manage and react to those stresses. And then we have toxic stress. And toxic stress is our body's response to severe or lasting stress. So a lot of times we think about things like emotional or physical abuse. We think about domestic violence. We think about a sudden death. Things like that are really things that we think of as like these big T traumas. But what we don't always think about is just chronic, prolonged, tolerable stress that becomes so chronic and typical that it becomes toxic and overwhelming to our system. And that's kind of where a lot of us are living at this point, because we've been managing this stress, these things that are happening outside of our control for so long that our bodies have become flooded with that gas pedal, right? We haven't had adequate time to rest. Our bodies are really still revved up. And so not all stress is bad, but what becomes harmful is when we're dealing with stress long term. Then it can become this idea of toxic stress. And what we know is that toxic stress has effects on every system in our body, our immune system, our endocrine system, our thinking. So it really does affect how we are able to show up in the world. And so with that, and this will be one of the last slides that I share with you, but within that stress response system, what we want is to kind of function within our window of tolerance. And we know as caretakers, as parents, we know when our children are functioning within their window of tolerance, right? The window of tolerance is really that space where we are alert, clear, content, calm, but not like deep rest, but calm. It's where we're regulated. We can optimally learn. We have access to our higher thinking, all of those executive functions like reasoning, planning, deciding. We can attune and relate to one another. So when we're in that window of tolerance, we can attune and relate. We can sense people's facial expressions. We can pick up on tone of voice. We can relate in a way that's compassionate and kind and empathetic. And our nervous system is flexible. So that stress response system, it's not meant to keep us calm all the time. It's meant to be flexible and adaptive so that when stressors happen, we can rev up, but then also we can go into rest, right? So there's a revving up and then there's a resting. There's a revving and a resting. And that's a flexible, healthy, resilient nervous system. And that's where we're operating here in this green space of the window of tolerance. You might also hear the term allostatic load, and that's just like that load of stress on our back becomes so heavy that we're outside of this window. And so what we find is this red zone where we're really hyper aroused, right? We're aggressive, we're irritable, we're cranky, we're quick to respond, we have no patience. Or the opposite, we come into this gray zone where we're shutting down, we are lethargic, we are depressed, we're tired, we're sad, we're not motivated. And so again, if you think about not only yourself, but thinking about the kids in your home, we can tell really quickly where our kiddos are in those zones, right? We know if they're in the red zone, the gray zone, or the green zone. And the thing is that as adults and as the caretakers in our homes and in our households, we really sometimes set the tone. We know that we resonate with each other. And so if we can practice self-awareness and practice keeping our nervous system flexible and adaptable and kind of keep ourselves fluctuating within that green zone for the most part, we know that we're then modeling those same skills for our children. And that when they are outside of their window, we can help them fluctuate back in the more that we stay within our window, if that makes sense, right? So before we get into some actual practices, that was a lot of information dumped just there. So I wanted to just check in and make sure that no one had any questions about any of those things, about the stress response system, the gas pedal, the brake pedal, about the window of tolerance, and how all of those things are connected. So if you think of any questions, you're welcome to type it into the chat box as we move along. And what we know about yoga and mindfulness, and which is why we're sharing these practices, we know that yoga and mindfulness practices directly affect some of those same systems in the body that bring that resting or brake pedal into play in our body. So we know that deep breathing and mindful movement and mindfulness practices trigger that resting response in our body, right? Okay, I don't see any questions coming in. So I'm going to keep moving right along, but you can certainly add in anything if you need to. Okay, so some of the practices that we're going to really go through today, we're going to practice a breath practice, a movement practice, and then a mindfulness practice. And like I mentioned, we will send all of those things to you if you're registered, along with additional resources with some other practices that you can try at home. So what I really wanted to do was to kind of take you through each of the practices just as if you were in a class, so that you really can feel the full benefit of them. And then afterwards, we can kind of check back in and I'll just kind of go over each of them again more as like a teaching tool so that you can kind of revisit them so that you can really start to practice and embody them and even share them with the people that you live with. All right. So I'm just going to ask you to kind of clear your space and find a nice tall seat, again, either in your chair or on the ground if you're sitting on the floor, or a yoga mat or a couch, wherever you're sitting, just finding a nice tall seat. And just take a moment to sit up really tall, feel your lungs start to kind of expand as you deepen your breath a bit. And maybe just take 1 or 2 deep breaths in and out. And so the breathing practice that we're gonna do together today is called a square breath. And so you may be familiar with this, you may have heard of this. Some students I've heard in schools are practicing 4-7-8 breath, which is similar. But square breath is a really great way to kind of balance and settle that stress response system. Also the nervous system, same thing, right? Stress response system, the nervous system. And so we know that when that gas pedal is constantly revved up, our nervous system is unsettled, right? And so square breath is a really great way to kind of bring that system back into balance so that we can just kind of reset. And so we'll breathe in for the count of 4, and you can kind of visualize, and I'll screen share with you at the end, but you can kind of see my little square here. But you really just kind of visualize breathing in for the top of the square. We're going to pause for the side, breathe out for the bottom of the square, and then we'll pause again so that you're literally connecting a square in your mind. For younger children or for any kids that just like to have a visual or a concrete representation of that breath, you can print out a square, you can draw a square, and you can have them trace their fingers along the sides of the square as they breathe, which is kind of nice, especially even for us as adults. It gives our body something to focus on, our mind something to focus on, as opposed to like just focusing on our breath, which can actually be triggering for some people. It can create anxiety for some of us to really focus on our breath. So sometimes that tracing of the square can be useful. Okay, so we're just going to go through it, and then I'll lead you right through a gentle movement and then through a mindfulness practice, and then we'll kind of come back and talk about them. All right, so sitting up nice and tall. Again, just take a moment to look up, down, side to side. Notice where you are. And then let your eyes focus on one point in your room. If your eyes want to just gently close, that's okay too. And just start to notice and feel for your breath. Just notice and feel for your breath. And either feeling it in your belly or up in your chest, or maybe both. Maybe you just really feel the air coming in and out of your nose. You're just starting to follow your breath that way. And then when you're ready, we're going to breathe into the count of 4. So go ahead and breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold that breath. Pause here for 1, 2, 3, 4. And then breathe out through your nose for 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold on to that exhale. Pause here for 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. 1, 2, 3, 4. Long breath out. 2, 3, 4. Hold on to your exhale. 2, 3, 4. We'll do 2 more. In breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause. 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Hold on to that exhale. Pause for 2, 3, 4. And one more time. Breathe in. Pause. Breathe out. And pause. And then just let your kind of natural rhythm of breath kick back in, letting go of the counting, or if you were tracing, let your hands come back to your lap. Good, and just kind of notice how you feel. And if you're able to, I'm going to invite you to stand up with me. If you need to stay sitting, that's certainly okay, but I'll invite you to stand up with me. I'm going to back up just a little bit. And so once you come up to stand, I'm just going to take a moment to really feel your feet on the floor. If you're sitting in your chair, you're going to just sit up nice and tall and feel your bottom in your seat. And if you're standing, you might even lean forward and back a few times just to really feel for the bottom of your feet. And then separate your feet a little bit wider than your hips. And then with your feet nice and solid and a soft bend in your knees, it's going to twist side to side. And so our legs are really steady here, really strong and stable. Our upper body is just really loosey-goosey. So you're going to let your arms just kind of float side to side. And you might let your gaze shift side to side as you twist so that your spine stays in one nice long line. You could even close your eyes if you like, but just letting your upper body Just really float and twist. No tension in the arms. And we'll just stay here for a few more moments. You might notice that you're taking a deeper breath in and out, or that you're yawning. Those are both signs that your brake pedal is kind of kicking in. So start to slow that down just a bit. And eventually just coming back, finding some stillness. And you might turn your palms forward and bring your feet in a little closer together, just standing nice and tall, and we'll call this mountain pose. We're just standing nice and tall in a mountain pose. Stretch your arms all the way up and take another breath in. And then let your arms come on down as you breathe out. And so you're welcome to stay standing. You're welcome to come back to your seat. I'm gonna just come back to my seat. And so just kind of check in, notice how you're feeling. And then we're gonna walk through a mindfulness practice together as well. And so this is a mindfulness of sound practice. And so you can do mindfulness of sound practices in many different ways. You can listen to a chime or a bell. You can listen to sounds that you hear outside the room or inside the room. We're actually going to make some sound with our body. We're going to do a little humming. So we'll start by just noticing the sounds that we hear, and then we'll move into a little bit of creating sound. And that noticing is what brings us to the present moment. So that's really what mindfulness is, right? The definition of mindfulness is just simply noticing what's happening in the here and now without judgment, without attachment, just noticing. And so noticing the sounds will help bring us to the present moment. And then actually creating some sound can also help to settle our nervous system, because it just creates a resonance, a vibration in our body, which can be really settling and soothing for some people. I mean, if you think about, babies and young children, they sing and hum and kind of just do all these things that we don't often do as adults, but they do when they're younger, because they don't have that self-conscious awareness not to do it, but they just automatically do the things that soothe them. All right, so you're just gonna find a tall spine one more time, sit up nice and tall. And again, focusing your eyes, or maybe letting them close. And just start, we'll take just about 20 seconds to notice the sounds around you. So just invite you to notice what you hear. So you might hear sounds in your room, you might hear things outside of your house, or maybe you're sitting outside. So just take the next 20 seconds and notice what you hear. And then staying with that awareness, noticing what you hear. I'm going to invite you to make or create some sound with me in the form of humming. And so it might just be a gentle hum where the lips stay connected and you're humming softly. It might be a more audible hum where you're opening the mouth and humming a little deeper from the belly. And obviously you're all on mute, so no one can hear you humming. So don't worry about that part. And if you're not comfortable humming, you can certainly just breathe. Right, so as you breathe in, just feel your belly or your chest expand. And as you breathe out, a gentle hum. And breathing in. And as you breathe out, a gentle 3 more. Breathing in. 2 more. And 1 more. And just take a moment to really notice how you feel. What you notice in your body or your mental awareness. And then if your eyes were closed, let them flutter open. And just looking around your space. Looking around your space. Looking behind you to the right and to the left. And then I would have you just check in with yourself and maybe jot down or just think in your mind what those practices felt like for you. Which of them resonated, which of them felt balancing or restful, if any of them. And also thinking about when you might use those tools. When in your day, realistically, thinking about your daily life, when might you actually use square breath or floating twist or mindfulness of sound? And again, I would invite you to share in the chat if you're thinking about when you practically would use any of those tools or how you're feeling after using those tools or just any questions that you might have. So I'm going to give just a moment. If anyone wanted to share anything, I'm actually going to plug in my computer because I noticed that it came unplugged. Sorry about that. And really that's part of, the practicality of this series is really figuring out, okay, which of these things work for me realistically and when could I use them? Who could I use them with? If not just for me, but who in my family could I use these tools with, right? All right. So I did want to just kind of walk back through some of those things. So I'm going to screen share one more time and just kind of walk through some of those tools a little bit more in depth now that you've kind of had a chance to feel them in your body. And again, this is all about balancing the nervous system. So it's about settling that stress response system. So when there's a time of your day that you know is particularly stressful or triggering for your children or for yourself, it's about noticing when those times are and how you can work in these tools to balance and rest. And so square breath was our breathing practice. And again, sometimes it's nice to have a visual representation for kids who like to have visual cues. You could also print out or draw a square on a chalkboard so that kids can trace along the square, especially for kids with sensory needs that like to have a tactile connection to what they're doing. And if a 4 count feels too long, for some of us that feels like holding the breath a little too long, you can just do a 2 or a 3 count, right? So that's not something that you need to stress about. It's really just about the evenness, the patterning of the breath, right? So that was our square breath. And just a couple of other things that you can consider with some breathing practices. Again, if it stresses your children out to ask them to focus on their breath, then don't even ask them to focus on the breath, right? They're breathing anyway, obviously, they're breathing. So if you can just have them focus on tracing the square, right, as they breathe, and not even focus so much on the counting. Another tip is to put a little like beanie baby. If you have young children, put a little beanie baby on their belly, and just to have them feel that bit of tactile pressure can kind of calm and connect them to a pattern of their breath, right? Another great tool for breath for little ones especially, but even for older kids, is one of the Hoberman spheres. And I don't have mine here with me in the moment, but they're the balls that open and close, right? You can get them at learning stores or on Amazon. So that visual representation of the in-breath and the out-breath can be really useful for kids who have a hard time, just because a lot of times, like, what happens? Think about what happens if you tell someone to take a deep breath, especially when they're already stressed. You see this, right? That is the opposite of what we want. That's that revving up. That's what happens when that gas pedal is on, is that our heart's beating fast and our breath gets shallow and our muscles are contracting. And so when we tell a young child especially to take a deep breath, a lot of times that's what we see. And we want the opposite of that. We want that gas pedal, or the brake pedal rather, to kick in, right? So we want the breath to be patterned and rhythmic and slow, and the heartbeat to calm down, and the muscles to release and to rest. So sometimes just giving that visual. Another thing, really, you don't even have to have any of those tools. It's just to hug your child. So if your breath pattern is slow and rhythmic and you're holding them or you're hugging them, then their breath pattern can start to match yours. So that's another idea as well. So our floating twist was our movement practice. And again, it's just a super simple movement, but it can be really effective for kids who are in that that hypoarousal, so that kids that are lethargic and kind of low and Eeyore, it can give them a little bit of energy. For kids who are in that hyperarousal, that Tigger space, right, where they're bouncing all over the place, or they're irritable, or they're even frustrated, that rhythmic slow movement can kind of bring them back down. So it's a really great tool just to balance our system. And it's just floating. And again, you'll see little kids, like my daughter's 3.5, she does this all the time. It's just a natural movement that she does, right? And it's really easy to do in the kitchen in the morning, or at a lunch break, or waiting for the bus. Lots of ways that you can incorporate that into your day-to-day. Our mindfulness practice, again, was just mindfulness of sound. And again, you can do that a lot of different ways. You can just have kids focus on what they hear in their bedroom. You can go outside and think about or write down after 20, 30 seconds, what were 3 or 5 things that you heard, 3 different noises. Again, for ourselves, sit in your car before you go in somewhere. What do I hear? What do I hear? What do I hear? In the shower, in your room before you get your day started. And then we added the humming, the making sound piece. And what's really nice, again, is with younger kids, these are things they do anyway. They're fun things, so you don't have to just hum. You can make a buzzing sound. You can make a snake sound. So breathing in through the nose and then zzz, or zzz, or like a snake. So you can make it fun and change it up, but that vibration, that pressing out of the air, those are the things that kick in that part of the nervous system that calms and quiets us, particularly that focus on the long exhale. So if we're humming, if we're making a buzzing sound, if we're hissing like a snake, that's really lengthening our exhale, and that lengthening of the exhale is what really starts to activate that part of our nervous system that settles us. So it's not really about the sound per se, it's about that lengthening of the exhalation, right? And then again, just thinking about when you could practically use some of these tools. Sometimes it's easy to do them when we're in a webinar or when we're in a yoga class, or it's that real life application that often becomes the tricky part, right? So it's, how do I use these tools in my day-to-day life? And the things to think about with that as well is, it's really hard to introduce these tools when we're outside of that window of tolerance, right? So the more that we can practice these tools when we're in that green zone, when our nervous system is flexible and adaptable and we're relatively calm and clear and engaged socially, those are the times to really practice these skills and turn them into habits, to build muscle memory around them, so that when we're outside of that window of tolerance, when we're in that red zone, when we're in that gray zone, in those times, we can access the tools, because that's really when we need them most, right? But if we don't have them kind of in our toolbox already, it's really hard to teach someone a new skill when they're outside of that window, right? Because they're relationally not able to attune to what you're offering them, and their thinking brain is completely turned off. So they can't process the new information, right? So starting to build habits around how and when you use those tools is really key as well. So I am going to open up for any questions that anyone has about any of the practices, any of the information that we shared. If you have a question, you're welcome to type it into the chat box. And then Ariel and I can kind of make sure that we respond to you. I'm just going to give a moment and see if we have any questions before we kind of end with one last little practice. Okay. It doesn't look like we have any at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave you with a 5-minute just restorative practice for yourself. In most households, it's getting close to bedtime. I know my crew just came home. I heard them come in the door. So this is just going to be a little restorative practice just for you. So again, you're welcome to just kind of clear your space, shut down your notebook, or turn a light down, or anything that you need to do to kind of take care of yourself in the moment. Shut a door if you need to. And just finding a comfortable seat again in your chair or on the floor, wherever you've landed. And I'm just going to invite you to bring your hands together and make some friction between your hands. And then just resting your hands on your cheeks and just noticing the temperature of your hands, the temperature of your cheeks. You can let your eyes focus on one thing or let them flutter closed. And so we're just getting connected, just noticing. Starting that process of settling our nervous system. And then I'm going to invite you to cross your arms over your chest and let your hands rest on your shoulders so that your elbows are crisscrossed over your chest and your chin's just going to drop forward. And so just take a moment to feel the heaviness of your arms on your chest. If this shape feels too constricting for your upper body, you're welcome to drop your arms down around your belly instead. I'll lower my screen here so you can see. So you just drop your arms down around your belly instead. Either way, the chin's going to drop forward. And just for about 3 or 4 breaths, just going to focus on that rise and fall of your chest or your abdomen as you breathe in and out. If you have access to noticing your breath, just following your inhale, your exhale, feeling for that connection of your arms to your chest or your belly. And when you're ready, you're just going to roll your head from side to side. Just little half circles with your head. And again, you might notice that you're spontaneously taking a deep breath in and out, or that you start to yawn, those are signs that your system is settling and that you're open to receiving relaxation in your body. Another moment here, head side to side. And then when you're ready, coming back to center, take a deep breath in through your nose and a long breath out through your nose. And you're going to open your arms out to the side like a big cactus or a goalpost. Lift your heart up, lift your eyes towards your ceiling and breathe in. And then breathe out, round your spine, bring your hands forward, interlace your fingers, and press your hands away from your body. You're just pressing your hands forward, looking down at your belly, and rounding your back towards your chair or towards the wall behind you. And we'll do that just 3 more times. We're going to open our arms out like a goalpost, lift our heart, and breathe in. And then as we breathe out, we're going to bring the hands forward, round our back, and press our hands forward. And just 2 more like that, breathing in. And breathing out. Breathing in. And breathing out. And then just coming back to center. Take a couple rolls of one shoulder in either direction. Notice which direction that you've chosen and just make sure that in a second you go the other way. And then when you're ready, take the other shoulder around in one direction and then around in the other direction. Good. Sit nice and tall. Take your arms all the way up as you breathe in. And as you breathe out, just turning your torso to the right, your hands are just going to rest alongside your chair. So your arm to the back of your body is going to reach for the back of your chair, or you can press your hand alongside the back of your spine. Your front hand is going to rest in your lap or reach across your opposite knee, just twisting your torso to the right, looking straight ahead. Taking a couple nice long breaths in and out. And slowly unwind, come back to center. Just notice how you feel. Stretch your arms up one last time as you breathe in, and as you breathe out, turn to the left. Your front arm is going to cross your body, and your back hand is going to rest on your chair or at the base of your spine. Just turning your torso to the left, looking straight ahead, and slowly breathing in and out through your nose. 2 or 3 more breaths. And slowly unwind, come back to center. And just notice how you feel. So I hope that this was helpful for you. One last call for any questions. If you are registered, you will get some information and resources sent to you after the fact. If you haven't registered, you're still able to do that. Thank you so much for being here with us. My name is Megan. I don't think I ever said that. My name is Megan Davis, and I'm the director of our curriculum and instruction at ZENworks Yoga. You can find us online at ZENworksYoga.com if you have any other questions. Thanks so much and have a great evening.